Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is begin. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear the verb begin used is to mean to start. This could be starting an action, another activity, a project. This can go in many different directions. The verb begin can also mean to perform the first part of some action or activity. We'll look at some examples of that a little later. A third way to use the verb begin is to mean to come into being or have its starting point at a certain time or place. So if you were planning an event, maybe since it's still a pandemic, we're thinking of something outside like a picnic. So you might say the picnic will begin at noon. Right? So that is its starting point. A fourth way you might hear the verb begin used is in reference to work. So it can mean that someone has held a specific position or a specific role before some other. As an example of that, sometimes you hear of CEOs in a particular company, and you might hear something like they began in the mailroom. So that was their first job, and then they worked their way up into a more senior position or role. You should know that begin is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're going to double the N, the last consonant here, because our verb ends with a consonant-vowel consonant. Then we'll add ing to form beginning. The past tense has a different spelling, so we're going to swap out the I, change it to A, and we'll form began. The participle is again made by changing that second vowel, so we're going I to U here, and it's pronounced begun. So again, with the participle form, you'll see that with maybe the present perfect, have begun, has begun, or it could be the past perfect, had begun, are some examples of that. I just have one phrasal verb that I want us to look at today, and that is to begin with. The meaning here is not substantially different than the earlier definitions, but when you see this phrasal verb, it's telling you that someone or something is going to be the first in a particular series. So as an example of that, we'll look at the example sentence. This is maybe something a teacher might say. Everyone is going to give their speech today, and we'll begin with Jenny. So Jenny here is the lucky student who gets to go first. Then after her, another, and another, until the whole class has shared their speeches. So that's what is meant by in a series. So again, it might help just to think I'm starting with. Today, we're going to continue practicing using our verb of the day, and we're going to focus on asking for permission. So this is something hopefully that's very common from child to adult, right? So the child is the one asking parents or guardians, grandparents, etc., for permission to do something or to do a particular activity. You might also see this students asking their teachers for permission. And it might be common in some work environments for employees to ask their managers or their supervisors for permission. So we're going to look at 3 different ways that we can ask for permission. They are all perfectly fine to use. We're going to start with less formal, and then we'll kind of work up to maybe the most formal way to ask for permission. But no, you can use any of these. People will understand you. You can always make something more polite by adding please, either before the verb or at the end of the sentence. So let's start with less formal permission. To do this, we're going to use the modal can. Then we'll have the subject, and generally it's I, might be we. We might be asking for permission for another person or another group of people. And then you're going to see the base verb, and then whatever information helps give context to the request. So our less formal example, maybe this is something a student says to their teacher. Can I begin the test? And the teacher might say, yes, you can. Sure, of course. Those are perfectly okay ways to answer that. Or if for some reason the teacher wanted the person not to begin, not to start, the teacher could say, no, you can't, sorry, but. And if you want to just make an affirmative statement giving someone permission, you can, again, form a sentence by starting with your subject, then we'll have the modal, and then the base verb, right? So an example of that, you can begin the movie. Right? You can start watching. Or if we want to make it negative, you can use cannot. You might hear some people use the contraction form can't. You can't begin practice. Maybe not yet for a particular reason. So let's make things just a wee bit more formal. And we're going to switch our modal to could. Okay? But our structure is going to be the same, right? So you'll see here, someone might ask the question, could he begin to work from home? And maybe this is a question for a supervisor at work. And you'll notice the answers here are pretty similar. You can say, yes, he can. So notice that might feel a little bit different. So we're not matching the modal there. We're going to say use can. So it's kind of indicating permission now. You could tell someone, go ahead. You could also say, sure, of course. All of those would be fine. Or if you want to respond in the negative, you can say, no, I'm sorry. No, he can't. And you might hear some people say, sorry, but, and provide a reason to explain why they are not giving permission. We're not going to use could to make affirmative or negative statements that give permission. We'll save that for our most formal way to ask permission, and that's using the word may. So again, our structure is going to be very similar here. May, then our subject, then the base verb. May we begin eating? Okay? So again, maybe this is a child asking their parents for permission. Maybe they know they're supposed to wait until everybody is at the table. Our answers here are going to be very similar. So the things we mentioned before, sure, of course, go ahead, those are fine. But you can match the modal here. Yes, you may would be a great way to answer that question. And then in the negative, we would say, no, you may not. We are not going to make a contraction with may and not. And you could also, again, use the sorry, but, and provide an excuse. Like I said before, we can make affirmative and negative sentences that either give permission or do not give permission to another person to do something. To do this, we'll go back to our structure of starting with a subject, then we'll use the modal may, then the base verb. So again, maybe a teacher to a student, you may begin to read. Or they may not begin talking. So one last note, as you looked at some of the examples here, I'm going to point a few of them out. You'll notice in my kind of mid-level of formality here, I use the phrase begin to work. And then in my more formal here, I used begin eating. I have begin to read, begin talking. So the thing that I want you to take away from this is that it is okay to use either infinitives, so that's to plus a verb, after the verb begin, or you can use gerunds, that's the ing form of the verb. So the words work, eating, read, talking, they look like verbs, but they are functioning like nouns in all of these sentences I've just pointed out. So in English, sometimes only an infinitive can come after some verbs. Others, only gerunds can, but this is one where either one will work. Now, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb begin. The first word we're going to look at is beginning. It can be a noun and it can also be an adjective, but we'll start by looking at some of the definitions for the noun form of this word. So beginning could be the point at which something begins or starts. Here's an example of that usage. It was clear from the beginning of the game which team would win. So as soon as the game started, oh, we had a good idea. One team will clearly be the winner for whatever reason. A second way to use this noun is to mean the first part of something. So an example of that could be, I hated the beginning of the movie. As I said before, beginning can also be an adjective. It could mean introductory. And let me give you an example of that and we'll talk about it. She's taking a beginning painting course. So the idea here is that the course is introducing how to paint. So the class, the teacher is not assuming that people already have knowledge about how to do this particular activity. Many times you'll see beginning used as an adjective to describe a lot of language classes. Someone might be taking a beginning Spanish class. I have previously taught beginning ESL courses. A second way you can use the adjective beginning is to refer to the first part of something. Here's an example of that. The beginning chapters of his novel are finished. So in this sentence, someone is writing a rather long book, a novel, and the first part of that book is complete. Now, the last word we're going to take a look at is the noun beginner. This is a person who is just starting to learn a new skill. So an example of that, her class is full of beginners. This can refer to a wide variety. This really doesn't have anything to do as with age. I have known of people in their 50s and 60s to say, I'm a beginner swimmer. I'm just learning how to swim, even though I'm older. And I think it's always great to try new things, learn new things. So there's nothing wrong with being a beginner. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.